Greetings YouTube, this is Remarkable Republican here once again to bring you the truth with a truth-flavored bias. I've always been a stalwart Republican, and all of you who've been following me for the last several years know that. But I do find myself having some serious questions about Donald Trump as president. In this video, I want to lay out the concerns that I have about Donald Trump morally, and explain why, if I cannot find adequate answers for these questions, I may end up having to vote for Joe Biden. So, let's go through these one by one. One thing that really bothered me was the way that Donald Trump behaved during the 2020 primary. He faced two serious challengers in the form of Bill Weld and Joe Walsh, especially Joe Walsh. My question for him is why he didn't allow the primary process to go forward so that people could air out their grievances and his opponents might actually have a chance. Joe Walsh was a very serious threat, although I think Trump would have won the primary even with Joe Walsh getting a fair shake. That being said, it comes across as cowardly at best. My question for Mr. Trump that I really want to hear an answer for is why he refused to debate or even acknowledge the existence of his two primary challengers. This is especially true for Mr. Walsh, who is far better than Trump as a Tea Party candidate. Joe Walsh is someone who very much represents the conservative values of the Republican Party, whereas Trump has been a little wishy-washy here and there, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Of course, the Republican primary in many ways ended due to the outbreak of coronavirus, which leads me to my next question. My next question involves Trump's handling of the epidemic. He appears alongside Dr. Fauci on TV pretty much every day holding a press conference, and he is consistently overwhelmed by Dr. Fauci. He is cucked by Fauci. Trump is the president, he's a leader, he needs to be the guy actually telling us how epidemics work. But instead, we have someone none of us voted for and someone none of us would ever want to see on TV talking at length while the president just stands there and nods. They often speak past one another, and the contradictions are never worked out. Contradictions should always favor the president since he has power, but it seems like Fauci is running the show. That is not acceptable. You also have Governor Chris Cuomo of New York, who very much is doing his own thing in New York that has nothing to do with what the rest of the country is doing, and he is more or less calling Trump an idiot and really talking a lot of shit while also getting federal aid. So my question for Trump, first part, why are you letting Dr. Fauci and Governor Chris Cuomo cuck you on TV all the time? Second part, are you aware that Fauci and Cuomo are clearly engaged in a homosexual relationship? I think everybody else in the world has figured that out at this point. Clearly the two men are in cahoots, and there is some love there between them. This is all to set up a Cuomo run at the presidency or a Cuomo VP pick for Joe Biden. And if that were to happen, then while Joe Biden might in theory be the first lady, it would actually be Fauci. And just in general, don't you think it's pretty weak to allow men like this, these two gay Democrats, to be questioning you during a time of crisis? Did we not elect you to stand up to this kind of leftism? Because I'm not seeing a lot of leadership, Mr. Trump. Speaking of responsibility and how one needs to present himself as a man on TV, let's talk about how any good Republican and any good American needs to be very careful about expanding the debt. The far left in this country is demanding free money for people who are stuck in quarantine and aren't working. You should never start that precedent. Once you start the slippery slope of giving away money for people who aren't doing work, it's just going to go straight to Soviet Russia every time. And what we're seeing is that Trump is caving into the demands of the far left during this crisis when it comes to economic policy. Nothing that he's done has been at all conservative. Doesn't he understand that This stimulus, so called, will be anything but a stimulus, and it will in fact crash the economy and cause a depression. There was only a mild downturn when FDR became president, and then when he started doing all this government spending, that's when it became a depression rather than a dip. Why give away $1,200 to everyone, recklessly expanding the debt at a time when China is a major threat and our Navy is smaller than it has been in 100 years? Obama reduced the size of the Navy. China is building up its Navy. That's a problem. If we're going to spend money we don't have, we should spend it where we're going to need it to survive, not spending it so people can continue to download video games while they're at home eating potato chips. I remember when you were a candidate, Mr. President, you promised that you would fight fake news and that you wouldn't take shit from the press. Yet, as president, that's all you've done. You've been extremely accommodating to your critics in the press, and you have been the exact opposite of candidate and businessman Donald Trump. As a businessman, anytime someone wrote slander against you, you took them to court and challenged them for it. Written slander is an offense. Yet, you allow it all the time. You also allow spoken slander constantly. Why are you doing that? Why do you allow your enemies to continue to act in this way? You know they will be unfair to you. Yet, you give them access, let everyone attend the daily briefings, you provide interviews with yourself and people in your administration, and you don't ever punish anyone or hold them accountable for their actions. Whatever happened to being the party of personal responsibility? So, to boil it down, why did you become a cuck as soon as you sat behind the desk in the Oval Office? And why don't you sue these people for slander? They're making things up. Stop allowing it. You need to be a man and use your presidential powers properly and like a leader. That's what we're looking for if we're going to vote for you. I've heard from many people I know who are fellow Trump supporters who say that Donald Trump would be pretty much the greatest president ever if he would just learn to not use Twitter. So my question for you is, why don't you go win over most of those old voters by just putting down your phone? It would be really easy. They'll still support you. All you gotta do is not get on Twitter and talk shit. And if you're going to talk shit, back it up. Put reporters in jail for writing slander. If you're not going to put up, shut up. And at this point, it's clear that you're not going to put up, so shut up. And if you're going to use Twitter, why go and say so many divisive things? Why not just be nice? What difference would it make? That's my question for you, Mr. Trump. One thing that I, as a public intellectual, take very seriously is science. In the past, I've done a number of studies on everything from carbon-14 dating to evolution, and I think it's important that people realize that most of academic science is a lie. Yet, Trump found this guy, Dr. Fauci, a liberal gay Democrat, and put him on TV to spread the homosexual agenda and leftism, rather than finding a real scientist. Mr. Trump, why did you make this concession to the left for no reason? Why did you give them this massive leg up? Here are some ideas about who you could put in their place, and these are ones I came up with right off the top of my head. Ken Ham, the guy who runs the Creation Museum, very well regarded scientist, and because this epidemic is something across the world, it would be helpful to have someone from Britain on your science committee. That way it makes it sort of a global effort. So it would be also outreach to a close ally, and it would be good for everybody. There's also Bill Nye. Now, while he's not a Republican and he's not a great example, he is a better scientist than Dr. Fauci because he can actually talk and communicate, and it would show national unity if you're trying to show the left and the right together. But best of all, there's Marcus Ross. He is a geologist and creation scientist who works at Liberty University. All of these men are more credible, telegenic, and likely to be loyal to you and help keep the public happy. Especially Marcus Ross, who does not get nearly enough credit. I can't say that enough. How can we trust you to fight a pandemic if you're not using a credible scientist as your main advisor. If we're going to get some liberal homosexual like Dr. Fauci, why not just go with Biden? What's the difference, really? Finally, I find that while I do have reservations about you, Mr. Trump, I am still willing to vote for you, provided that you make some changes to your ticket that are much needed and set us up for, frankly, a better, more conservative president in the future. Let me ask you some questions, sir. Do you get that your primary challengers were there because they want you to stop appeasing the left? Joe Walsh especially wants you to get back to conservative principles. Do you also understand that Mike Pence was not the optimal choice for VP? He would not be a very good president and would not be elected in his own right. But there is someone in your party who you can help get to that office. Someone who is an excellent conservative who will not only consolidate all the things that you did, but build on them and make you look like gold. That is Ted Cruz of Texas. Do you understand that Ted Cruz brings far more to the ticket than Pence? If people see Ted Cruz's name on the ticket, they will be excited. They know that Ted Cruz is a very serious candidate who can get the job done. He almost won the primary in 2016, and he is a very serious presidential contender. Did you also know that if you put Cruz on the ticket now, you can finish out your second term, and then Cruz will get 2 back-to-back terms, which means that everything that you did will be completely consolidated. This is the key to being a better than average president, Mr. Trump, despite your earlier failings, such as making far too many concessions to the left and backing away on issues such as marijuana and gay marriage. So those are my questions for Mr. Trump. Depending on how those questions are answered over the next few months, I may in fact end up voting for Joe Biden, which will make me very ill, and I will most likely have to attend the election blindingly drunk. I'm Remarkable Republican, bringing you the truth with truth-flavored bias, signing out.